"Get that food away from me," Odette screamed, knocking the plate from the chubby cook's hands. 20 chefs failed. What makes you think you're different?" Everyone expected Elara to apologize. Instead, she picked up another spoon, tasted the dish herself, and said, "Nothing. So I'm not asking you to eat." The feared mafia boss stepped forward, furious, until his mother suddenly whispered, "Give me that spoon." Matthias froze. His mother hadn't willingly eaten in months, but Elara noticed something worse. Someone across the room looked terrified that she finally had. 3 hours earlier, Elara Whitcomb had been warned twice not to argue with Matthias Savelli. The first warning came from the man who searched her bag. The second came from a housekeeper who lowered her voice before saying his name. Elara understood the message. People did not simply work for Matthias Savelli. They adjusted themselves around him. At 38, he controlled Savelli Holdings, an empire spanning construction, shipping, real estate, and private security. Newspapers called him an industrialist. Businessmen called him ruthless. Other men called him nothing at all, unless they were certain the room was secure. Elara knew the rumors. Mafia, influence, people who disappeared from negotiations and returned suddenly eager to compromise. She also knew she needed the job. That stopped mattering approximately 30 seconds after meeting him. "My mother has had 23 cooks in 4 months, Matthias said. He stood across from Elara, immaculate and motionless, studying her with the expression of a man accustomed to discovering weaknesses before anyone could hide them. 23? None lasted. That sounds encouraging. His eyes narrowed slightly. Elara had learned years ago that humor could either soften powerful people or annoy them. Apparently, Matthias Savelli belonged to the second category. "She needs to eat," he said. "If she doesn't, you're finished." Elara stared at him. "Then fire me now." Silence. The security man near the door looked at her as though she had just volunteered for her own funeral. Matthias did not raise his voice. That was somehow worse. "You haven't started." "I know. Then perhaps you'd like to explain." Elara folded her hands over her soft stomach and resisted the instinct to retreat beneath his stare. "If my job depends on forcing a frightened woman to eat, I can't do it. My mother is not frightened. Then why isn't she eating?" His jaw tightened. That was the first crack. Small, but unmistakable. Elara had seen that expression before. Not on a mafia boss, on herself. Years earlier, her father had spent months undergoing treatment that left food tasting wrong and his stomach turning before meals. Everyone around him had tried to help. "Eat this. Try that. Just one bite. You need your strength." Every loving suggestion had become another demand. Eventually, her father had begun fearing the table before anything was even served. Elara had learned something then that culinary school had never taught her. Sometimes feeding someone began long before the first bite. "I read the medical notes you authorized," she said. "Your mother survived poisoning. Now every meal arrives with people watching to see whether she survives that too. I replaced the kitchen staff. I know. The suppliers. I know. The security team. I know. I had every ingredient tested. And she still doesn't eat." His expression hardened. Elara knew she was close to crossing whatever invisible line kept everyone else obedient. But Odette Savelli did not need another obedient cook. She needed someone willing to notice the obvious. You can't order someone to stop being afraid. The room became so quiet that Elara heard the security man's restrained inhale. Matthias moved closer. He was tall enough to make most people step backward without thinking. Elara stayed where she was. For several seconds, he simply studied her. Then he asked, "What exactly would you do differently?" "I'd stop making every meal a test she can fail. And if that doesn't work?" Then you hire chef number 25. Something changed in his face. Not amusement. Not yet. Perhaps surprise that she had not promised him a miracle. You have 1 week, he said. Elara blinked. A week? If she asks you to leave, you leave. If her doctors object, you're done. You change nothing medically without approval. Good. And if I tell you to stop? Elara picked up her bag. Then I stop. His gaze followed her. For a man who could apparently make executives reconsider multi-million-dollar decisions with a telephone call, Matthias Savelli looked strangely unsettled by a cook who had simply agreed to walk away. Elara reached the door. Elara, she turned. Why take this job if you're so willing to lose it? She considered giving him the safe answer. Instead, she told him the truth. Because your mother needs someone more interested in whether she eats than whether you fire them. For the first time, Matthias had no immediate reply. And that was how Elara Whitcomb got the most dangerous cooking job in the city. By refusing to cook on command. Odette Savelli hated Elara on sight. You're too cheerful, she said from her chair. Elara glanced behind herself. Is there another cook in the room? I mean you. That's unfortunate. I've been like this for years. Odette's mouth tightened. She was elegant, even after months of illness had sharpened her face. But what Elara noticed most was not weakness. It was vigilance. Odette watched hands. She watched doors. And whenever food entered the room, she watched the plate as if it might move on its own. So Elara did something none of the previous cooks had done. She removed it. The first morning, she asked Odette whether she wanted breakfast. No. All right. The second morning, she offered 3 choices. Odette rejected all 3. Elara shrugged and left. By the third day, Odette seemed irritated. Aren't you supposed to convince me? No. Matthias hired you to make me eat. Matthias hired me to cook. Elara leaned closer, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Between us, I'm not cooking for a mafia family. I'm cooking for one stubborn woman with terrible manners. Odette stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, one corner of her mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile, but it was progress. Elara began giving her control over things everyone else had taken away. Would she prefer something warm or cold, sweet or savory? Did she want Elara in the room? Did she want Matthias gone? That last question produced immediate results. Gone. Matthias, standing near the doorway, frowned. This is my house. And apparently you're ruining lunch, Elara said. Odette's eyes brightened. Matthias looked between them, clearly reconsidering several life choices. But he left. The portions became smaller too. Not because Elara expected Odette to eat less, but because a full plate looked like an obligation. 2 spoonfuls could be refused without consequence. And once refusal became safe, tasting became possible. Odette began testing her. One afternoon, she requested toast. Nothing on it. No butter. No jam. Burned at the edges. Elara brought exactly that. Matthias happened to arrive as his mother took a cautious bite. He stared at the plate. We're paying you for burnt bread? Your mother ate half of it. Matthias looked at Odette, then at the toast, then back at Elara. Exactly, Elara said. Odette laughed. It was brief and rusty, as though the sound itself had gone unused. Matthias stopped moving. For a moment, the feared man vanished. There was only a son hearing his mother laugh again. Elara looked away before he noticed she had seen it. But someone else had been watching. Colette Dane, the estate's nutrition coordinator, stood near the doorway with her tablet held against her chest. She was polished, precise, and professionally courteous to everyone, except Elara. That bread wasn't part of today's nutritional plan, Colette said. No, Elara agreed. And burning food unnecessarily isn't advisable. Probably not. Odette's expression began to close again. Colette stepped nearer. Considering what happened, we should be especially careful. We still don't know exactly what caused the original poisoning. The change in Odette was immediate. Her fingers stopped. The remaining toast returned to the plate. Elara saw her eyes move from the bread to Colette, then toward the doorway. Her breathing had changed, not dramatically, just enough. Elara didn't push the plate back toward her. She didn't say it was safe. She simply picked up the other piece and took a bite herself. "Terrible," she said. Odette looked at her. "You burned it. You ordered it burned. I didn't tell you to destroy it. Your instructions lacked technical precision." Another faint smile. The tension loosened, but it did not disappear. Elara filed the moment away. That evening, Odette managed several spoonfuls of broth and asked for toast again the following morning. It should have felt like a small victory. Instead, Elara kept thinking about the way fear had returned to Odette's face. Not when she tasted something. Not when she swallowed. When someone reminded her that food could kill her. And for the first time since arriving at the Savelli estate, Elara wondered whether everyone in the house actually wanted Odette to stop being afraid. By the end of Elara's first week, Odette was eating something every day. Not enough to call it recovery. Not enough to reduce the medical supervision surrounding her, but enough that her doctor stopped looking at Elara as if Matthias had hired entertainment instead of a cook. The progress came in embarrassingly ordinary forms. A few spoonfuls of broth, half a boiled potato, toast, a little rice. Then, one afternoon, Odette asked for chicken soup. Elara paused. "You mean actual soup?" Odette gave her a dry look. "Unless you've invented an imaginary kind." Elara smiled. "I'll check the pantry." She kept it simple. No elaborate presentation. No expensive ingredients designed to prove expertise. More importantly, Odette chose where it was prepared. She chose who brought it. She even watched Elara taste from the same batch before her bowl was served. Then she ate. Slowly. Every few bites, her hand hesitated. Elara never told her to continue. By the time Odette placed the spoon down, more than half the bowl was gone. Matthias had been standing outside the open doorway. He had promised not to watch. Technically, he hadn't entered. Elara found him there afterward. "You're terrible at following instructions." "I wasn't in the room. You were lurking." "I don't lurk." "Of course not. You stand ominously in hallways." His expression remained composed, but something almost amused moved through his eyes. Then he looked past her toward his mother. "How much?" "Enough." "How much is enough?" "Enough that you shouldn't walk in there and make her feel like she just passed an examination." That erased the almost smile. "You seem comfortable giving orders in my house." "You seem comfortable needing them." Matthias stared at her. A week earlier, that stare had made Elara's pulse jump from caution. Now it did so for a different reason. She disliked noticing that. The man was dangerously handsome, yes. That was hardly a secret. But beauty wasn't what unsettled her. It was the contradiction. The city feared Matthias Savelli because he seemed impossible to shake. Yet every night, without exception, he checked on his mother. Elara learned that he knew every medication Odette took and which ones upset her stomach. He knew the names of her doctor's children because he had spoken to the doctors that often. When Odette slept poorly, Matthias somehow knew before breakfast. He controlled corporations, armed security, and a network of influence Elara preferred not to understand. But when his mother lifted a spoon, he became helpless enough to stand outside a doorway and count bites. That night, Elara found him alone in the kitchen. His jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled back. A phone rested beside him. "You're still here," she said. "So are you. I'm the cook. I own the house. Congratulations." That almost smile appeared again. Then his phone rang. Matthias answered. Yes. He listened for several seconds. His face did not change. Freeze the transaction. All of it. Another pause. No, he had one opportunity to explain. His voice remained quiet. End it. He disconnected. Ilara looked at him. Should I ask? No. Excellent. I wasn't going to. For the first time, Matthias actually smiled. It disappeared quickly. You're not afraid of me. Ilara considered that. I didn't say that. His gaze sharpened. There's a difference between being afraid and letting fear make every decision for you. The words settled between them. They were no longer talking only about Matthias. He knew it. So did she. Upstairs, Odette had eaten the largest meal she had managed in months. That should have been the only thing that mattered. But the following morning, the chicken Ilara had specifically ordered was gone. A replacement package sat in its place. When she asked why, a kitchen assistant told her the original delivery had been rejected after someone questioned the supplier. Who? The assistant hesitated. Ms. Dane approved the change. Ilara said nothing. She opened her notebook instead. Under the date, she wrote 3 things. Odette ate more. Colette warned her again. Preferred ingredient, replaced without notice. Then Ilara closed the notebook. Once was caution. Twice could be coincidence. But if it happened a 3rd time, she intended to find out why. The 3rd time happened 2 days later. Odette had asked for baked apples with cinnamon. It was the kind of request Ilara had learned not to celebrate aloud. Every time someone praised Odette's progress too enthusiastically, the older woman seemed to remember that everyone was measuring it. So Ilara simply nodded. Soft? Very. Sweet? Not offensively. I'll try to restrain myself. Odette almost smiled. An hour later, the apples never reached her. Colette intercepted Ilara outside the kitchen. We're postponing them. Ilara stopped. Why? The cinnamon came from a newly opened container. Yes, I opened it. Given Mrs. Savelli's history, unnecessary variables aren't appropriate. Ilara stared at her. It's cinnamon. It is an ingredient whose safety hasn't been independently confirmed. The statement sounded reasonable. That was what bothered Ilara. Everything Colette said sounded reasonable. A frightened woman should be careful. An unverified supplier should be questioned. An unfamiliar ingredient could wait until tomorrow. No single warning was outrageous. Together, they formed a cage. Ilara went upstairs without the apples. Odette noticed immediately. Where are they? Delayed. Why? Ilara watched the older woman's expression change before she had even answered. That was when she understood. Odette no longer needed someone to tell her food was dangerous. The interruption itself was enough. Never mind, Odette said. Her hands tightened around the blanket. I don't want anything. Ilara sat down. She did not argue. But that evening, another line entered her notebook. Requested food stopped after progress. Then another. Fear triggered before food was even presented. She went backward through her previous entries. The pattern was clearer on paper. Every meaningful improvement had been followed by disruption. A supplier concern. A changed ingredient. A delayed meal. A carefully worded warning from Colette. None of it was enough to accuse anyone. But it was enough to make Ilara angry. The following afternoon, Matthias found her in a small sitting room, with the notebook open across her lap. His presence changed the atmosphere before he spoke. A guard outside straightened. A staff member crossing the corridor quietly changed direction. Matthias noticed none of it, because people reacting to him was as ordinary as breathing. His attention settled on the notebook. What is that? My notes. About recipes? No. He held out his hand. Elara closed the notebook. No. His eyebrows lifted. People probably did not tell Matthias Savelli no very often. You're keeping records about my household. I'm keeping records about your mother. Give it to me. Ask nicely. His stare could have frozen boiling water. Elara. Matthias. He stepped closer. Are you investigating my household? Someone should. His expression hardened. I have professionals for that. Then maybe ask why they missed what the cook noticed. The silence afterward felt dangerous. Not because Matthias threatened her. He didn't. That was precisely why his anger carried weight. Men who needed to advertise power shouted. Matthias simply became still. What did you notice? Elara opened the notebook. She showed him the sequence. Not conclusions. Not accusations. Just behavior. Odette improved. A warning followed. Odette requested something voluntarily. An ingredient was replaced. She became comfortable with a meal. Its preparation was interrupted. Again. Matthias read every entry. Colette? I don't know. You wrote her name 4 times. Because she was present 4 times. That's not the same as knowing why. His eyes lifted. You think she's harming my mother. I think your mother is being repeatedly reminded to fear food whenever she starts trusting it. Matthias reached for his phone. Elara caught his wrist. The movement surprised both of them. His gaze dropped to her hand. Elara released him. Don't. You're becoming remarkably comfortable with that word. If you confront Colette now, she'll know we're watching. We? Elara hesitated. Matthias noticed. Something changed in his eyes, warmer and more dangerous than anger. Elara ignored it. I could be wrong, she said. Maybe she's overly cautious. Maybe she genuinely believes she's protecting Odette. And if you're not wrong, then frightening your mother may not be the goal. Matthias went still again. Elara thought of Odette watching hands, watching doors, watching every plate. Someone had poisoned her once. Everyone had searched for the person who might try again. But what if trying again was unnecessary? What if the goal, Elara said quietly, is simply to make sure she never feels safe enough to recover? Matthias looked toward the staircase. When he spoke, his voice was almost expressionless. My mother was poisoned after a family dinner. I know. Only people inside this house knew exactly what she ate. Elara felt the implications settle heavily between them. This was no longer about an overprotective nutrition coordinator. Matthias took the notebook. This time, Elara let him. From now on, he said, if anything changes in her food, her schedule, her deliveries, or the people around her, you tell me. Without confronting anyone. His jaw tightened. For now. Elara nodded. Matthias started toward the door, then stopped. Don't investigate alone. I wasn't planning to. That wasn't a suggestion. She gave him a look. He exhaled slowly. Please. Elara blinked. Apparently, miracles did happen in the Savelli house. Better, she said. He left without answering. That night, Elara brought Odette plain broth prepared from ingredients the older woman had personally approved. Odette managed only 3 spoonfuls. On the 4th, she stopped. Elara? Yes? There was something I was supposed to tell Matthias. Elara didn't move. About the night you were poisoned? Odette's face tightened. I don't know. Her fingers trembled around the spoon. I remember being angry. At whom? Odette closed her eyes. For several seconds, nothing came. Then she whispered, money. Elara felt every instinct sharpen. What about money? Odette opened her eyes. Fear was there. But behind it, for the first time, something else had returned. Memory. Someone was stealing from my family. Matthias wanted names. Elara wanted patience. Odette could give them neither. By morning, the memory had retreated again. leaving behind only fragments. Money, an argument, a man. The harder Matthias questioned her, the more visibly Odette struggled. "What account?" he asked. "I don't know. Was it someone who worked for us?" I said I don't know. Mother, think. Odette pushed her breakfast away. Elara immediately stepped between them. Out. Matthias looked at her. "Excuse me? You're turning breakfast into an interrogation. This matters. So does her eating. She remembered something, and now you're making her afraid of forgetting it." That stopped him. Odette looked exhausted. Matthias looked furious with himself. He left. For the next 2 days, nobody mentioned the memory. Elara returned to routine. Choices. Small portions. No celebration. No pressure. Then Odette asked for something unexpected. Rice pudding. Elara looked up. With cinnamon? Odette frowned. No. A pause. Orange peel. Something about the answer seemed to surprise Odette herself. Elara prepared it exactly that way. When she brought the bowl upstairs, Odette stared at it for a long time. "My mother made this." Elara sat nearby. "Was she any good?" "Better than you, presumably. You haven't tasted mine. I don't need evidence." But Odette picked up the spoon. One bite. Then another. Her expression changed on the third. The spoon stopped halfway back to the bowl. "Elara." There was something in her voice that made Elara straighten. Odette wasn't looking at the food anymore. "He wore a ring." Elara said nothing. "A black stone. Square." Her breathing quickened. Elara resisted the urge to ask 10 questions at once. "What do you remember?" "The study." Odette closed her eyes. "I had papers, statements from the family trust." Her fingers tightened around the spoon. "There were transfers I didn't authorize." "How many?" "I don't know." "That's all right. Don't tell me it's all right." The old sharpness returned suddenly. "Someone stole from my family." Elara almost smiled. Anger, at least, was not fear. Odette continued. "I confronted him the night before the dinner." "Who?" Odette's eyes opened. "I couldn't see his face when I remembered it before." She swallowed. "But I remember his hand on the papers." The black stone. Square. Elara had seen it. Not once. Many times. Corbin Vale wore it on his right hand. The Savelli family's financial advisor had visited the estate twice during Elara's first week. Calm, silver-haired, impeccably dressed, he carried the comfortable authority of someone who had belonged there for years. He had shaken Matthias's hand with that ring visible between them. Elara's stomach tightened. She did not tell Odette the name. Memory was fragile enough, without someone else placing pieces into it. Instead, she asked, "Would you recognize the ring?" Yes. That was enough. Elara left Odette with her nurse and went looking for Matthias. She found him downstairs with 3 men in dark suits and Corbin Vale. Elara stopped before entering. Corbin was speaking quietly about an acquisition. Then he reached across the table for a document. Black stone. Square setting. Elara felt cold. Corbin glanced up. Their eyes met. He smiled politely. "Miss Whitcomb." "Mr. Vale." His gaze lingered on her for half a second too long. Elara smiled back, then walked away. She did not confront him. She did not accuse him. She did not attempt to become a detective simply because she had noticed something important. She waited. 20 minutes later, Matthias entered the kitchen alone. "You wanted me?" Elara closed the door. "Your mother remembered more." Every trace of distraction vanished. "What?" She found suspicious transfers from the family trust. She confronted a man before the poisoning. "Who?" She doesn't remember his face clearly. Matthias's frustration flashed. But she remembers his ring. Elara described it. Nothing moved in Matthias's face. That frightened her more than anger would have. He knew. "Corbin," he said. "Yes." "No." The answer came too quickly. Alara watched him. Matthias turned away. "Corbin has managed family finances for 18 years. That doesn't change what she remembers. He was there when my father died." Alara remained silent. "He helped protect my mother during the transition. He has access because I gave it to him." Now she understood. This wasn't merely suspicion. It was betrayal threatening a place Matthias had considered secure. "Alara." He turned back to her. "Are you certain?" "No." The answer surprised him. "I am certain your mother described his ring. I'm certain she remembers unauthorized transfers. Everything after that needs evidence." Matthias studied her. "You could have confronted him. That would have been stupid. You could have told my mother his name. That would have contaminated what she actually remembers." His gaze remained on her. For the first time since she had entered the Savelli estate, Alara saw something in Matthias that had nothing to do with power. Trust. Not the casual trust of a man delegating work. The dangerous kind. The kind that required surrendering control. "What do you need?" she asked. Matthias looked toward the closed door. "When Corbin leaves, my people will begin tracing every transaction he has touched." Quietly. "Yes. And Colette?" "We watch her." Alara nodded. She reached for the door. Matthias caught her hand. Not hard, just enough to stop her. "Why did you come to me first?" She looked down at his fingers around hers, then back at him. "Because I'm a cook, Matthias. That hasn't stopped you so far." Despite herself, she smiled. Then her expression softened. "Because this part isn't mine to solve alone." His grip loosened, but he didn't immediately release her. For a second, neither moved. The air between them felt different now. Closer. More dangerous. Not because Matthias Savelli was the most feared man in the city. Because Alara was beginning to understand the man underneath that reputation. And Matthias was beginning to understand that trusting her felt nothing like losing control. Then footsteps approached outside. He released her. Alara opened the door. At the far end of the corridor stood Corbin Vale. His expression was pleasant. His posture relaxed. But his eyes moved from Matthias to Alara, then to the closed kitchen door behind them. For the first time, Corbin did not smile. By midnight, Matthias had confirmation. Not proof of poisoning. Not yet. But money had moved. Small transfers at first, scattered through companies that looked unrelated to the Savelli family. Then larger amounts disappeared through consulting contracts, property vehicles, and accounts designed to make each transaction look ordinary on its own. Together, they formed a pattern. Corbin Vale had been stealing for years. Matthias stood in his study, while one of his security chiefs finished explaining the preliminary findings. "How much?" "We're still tracing it." "How much?" "At least 14 million. The room went silent. Alara stood near the doorway. She had been asked to come because Odette had remembered another fragment, but now she wished she hadn't heard the number. Matthias showed almost no reaction. That was the problem. His stillness had changed. This was no longer the controlled silence Alara had learned to recognize. It was rage compressed, until it had nowhere left to go. "Bring Corbin to me." The security chief nodded. "Now." "No." Everyone turned toward Alara. Matthias did not. For 1 second, she wondered whether he had even heard her. Then he looked over. "Leave us." The security men disappeared without hesitation. That alone reminded Alara exactly who she was challenging. When the door closed, Matthias spoke. "He nearly killed my mother." "I know. You know what we have now. Evidence that he stole money. And motive. Not proof that he poisoned her." His jaw flexed. "I don't need a courtroom to tell me what happened." "No, but you need evidence if you want to know how he did it," who helped him, and whether anything else is still hidden. I can get answers from Corbin. Elara understood what that sentence meant, precisely because Matthias did not explain it. She stepped closer. And if he realizes you've found the money before you've secured everything, he won't have time to destroy anything. You don't know that. His eyes hardened. Careful. No. The word landed between them. Matthias moved toward her. Most people retreated when he did that. Elara had seen it happen repeatedly. She stayed where she was. He nearly killed my mother, he repeated, quieter now. And if anger makes you stupid for 5 minutes, he wins twice. The silence became absolute. Matthias stared at her. Elara's heart was beating hard enough that she could feel it in her throat. She was afraid. She simply refused to let fear choose her next sentence. You've spent months asking why Odette won't trust anything, she said. Now we finally have a thread. Don't tear it apart, because hurting him would feel better than following it. Something dangerous flashed across Matthias's face, then vanished. He turned away. For several seconds, Elara heard nothing except his breathing. When he finally spoke, the anger remained, but control had returned with it. Then tell me what you need. Elara blinked. It was the first time Matthias Savelli had asked her to lead anything. We let Corbin believe nothing has changed. Matthias listened. Your people keep tracing the transfers, quietly. Find out who authorized access, where the money went, and whether Colette received anything. And my mother. Corbin needs to believe she still remembers too little to threaten him. Matthias's expression shifted. You want to use her as bait? No. Elara's answer was immediate. I want Odette to decide whether she wants to help. She won't. You don't get to decide that for her. His gaze sharpened again. She is my mother. Exactly, not your soldier. Matthias looked almost offended by the distinction. Elara softened her voice. You've protected her by controlling everything around her. After what happened, I understand why. She paused. But control is part of what she's been trapped inside for months. That reached him. Elara saw it. You can't give her safety by taking every choice away. Matthias looked toward the dark window. When he answered, his voice was lower. If something happens to her again, you'll never forgive yourself. He turned. Elara held his gaze. But that's your fear, Matthias. Don't make it hers. For perhaps the first time in years, there was nothing the most powerful man in the city could command into submission. Not memory, not fear, not his mother's recovery, not the woman standing in front of him. His phone vibrated. Matthias looked at the screen. A message. He read it once. Then again. What? Elara asked. His eyes lifted. One of the accounts paid a private consulting company 6 times in the last 4 months. Whose company? They're checking. Another message arrived seconds later. Matthias read it. His expression went cold. Colette Dane. Elara felt the last possibility of coincidence disappear. Matthias reached for the door. This time, Elara didn't stop him. Where are you going? To speak to my mother. Ask her. He glanced back. Don't tell her what she's going to do. For a moment, the old Matthias seemed ready to argue. Then he gave a single nod. Upstairs, Odette listened without interruption as her son explained what they had found. When he finished, Matthias did something that surprised Elara more than any threat could have. He asked, "What do you want to do?" Odette looked from her son to Elara. Fear crossed her face. Then anger. Then something Elara had not seen since arriving. Authority. I want Corbin to believe I'm getting my memory back. Matthias stiffened. Mother, you asked. He stopped. Odette's mouth curved faintly. Good. You're learning. Then she looked at Elara. And if we're going to frighten a thief, we may as well feed him. Elara stared at her. Odette lifted an eyebrow. Plan a dinner. For the first time since the poisoning, Odette Savelli was not trying to escape the table. She was choosing to sit at it. And this time, Corbin Vale would be the one afraid of what might be served. The dinner was deliberately small. Odette insisted on that. No crowded table, no theatrical gathering of suspects, no obvious increase in security. Only Matthias, Odette, Corbin, Colette, and Ilara moving between the kitchen and dining room, as though nothing had changed. Behind the walls, everything had. Matthias's security team was monitoring the estate. Financial investigators had already preserved copies of the records Corbin could potentially destroy. And earlier that afternoon, they had found something worse. Payments to Colette had begun shortly after Odette's poisoning. Colette finally admitted the truth when confronted privately. Corbin had never told her to poison anyone. He had paid her to keep Odette cautious. Every warning, every delayed meal, every suggestion that an ingredient might be unsafe. Colette had convinced herself she was doing no real harm. After all, Odette was medically supervised. She was receiving nutrition. She was alive. Corbin had simply paid Colette to make sure fear remained stronger than appetite. Matthias wanted her removed immediately. Odette disagreed. "Let her sit there," she said. So Colette sat at the table looking as though every breath required permission. Corbin arrived precisely on time. He wore the black stone ring. Ilara noticed Odette notice it. The older woman's hand tightened around her napkin. Ilara met her eyes from across the room. No pressure, no instruction. Odette could end this whenever she wanted. Instead, she lifted her water glass. Corbin smiled. "You look remarkably well. I've been remembering things." His smile survived. Barely. Matthias said nothing. That was part of the plan. Corbin knew Matthias well enough to fear his silence more than questions. Dinner began. Odette ate. Not much, but publicly, calmly. Ilara watched Corbin watch every bite. There it was again. The same thing she had noticed when Odette first reached for that spoon. Not relief. Fear. "I remembered the trust," Odette said eventually. Corbin placed his fork down. "The family trust? The transfers." Colette closed her eyes. Corbin did not look at her. "Perhaps this isn't the best time to discuss finances." Odette smiled without warmth. "Interesting. You used to believe there was never a bad time to discuss money." Corbin's expression remained controlled. "What exactly do you remember?" Matthias finally looked at him. The question had come too quickly. Corbin realized it. He reached for his wine but did not drink. "Fragments," Odette said. Ilara watched him relax by a fraction. Then Odette added, "But they're returning." That was enough. 20 minutes later, Corbin excused himself to take a call. There was no call. Security cameras followed him away from the dining room, through the west corridor, and toward the private office wing. Matthias remained seated. Every instinct in his body seemed to demand movement. Ilara saw his hand tighten once beneath the table. He waited. For her. For the plan. For evidence. Corbin entered the records room, using credentials he had possessed for years. He opened a secure cabinet. Then he removed a drive from inside his jacket and connected it to the financial archive terminal. That was when Matthias's phone vibrated. He read the message. Stood. "Stay here." Odette almost laughed. "No. Mother. I have spent months being afraid in my own home." She rose carefully. "You are not finishing this conversation for me." Matthias looked ready to refuse. Then his eyes moved to Ilara. She said nothing. He understood anyway. Odette walked beside her son. Ilara followed. By the time they reached the office, 2 security men had Corbin away from the terminal. For the first time since Ilara had met him, Corbin Vale looked ordinary. Not trusted. Not composed. Not untouchable. Just caught. His eyes found Odette. "You don't understand." Odette looked at the drive still connected to the computer. "I understand enough." Corbin's composure fractured. "I never intended for you to die." Matthias moved. Elara had never seen men react so quickly. Two guards shifted instinctively, not to protect Matthias from Corbin, but as though they feared what Matthias might do if he reached him. Odette raised one hand. "Matthias." He stopped. "Barely." Corbin swallowed. The dose wasn't supposed to be lethal. The room changed. It was no longer only financial fraud. He had said it himself. One of the security men quietly activated the recording protocol already prepared for the confrontation. Corbin realized too late. Odette stared at the man who had sat at her family's table for 18 years. "You poisoned me." I panicked. "You paid her afterward." His eyes flicked toward Colette, who had been escorted into the corridor behind them. "To keep you calm." Elara almost laughed at the obscenity of the phrase. Odette did not. "No," she said. "You paid her to keep me afraid." Corbin's face tightened. "You were going to destroy everything. I was going to expose a thief. You have no idea what Matthias would have done to me." Odette glanced at her son. Perhaps, once, that argument might have mattered. Now it didn't. She stepped closer to Corbin. "You didn't make me afraid of dying." Her voice remained steady. "You made me afraid of living." Corbin had no answer. Odette did not need one. The evidence did the rest. Financial records connected him to the stolen funds. Colette's payments established the campaign to reinforce Odette's fear. The archive access attempt showed his intention to interfere with evidence, and his own recorded words tied him directly to the poisoning. Matthias could have handled Corbin according to the rules of the world he secretly ruled. Everyone in that room knew it. Instead, he looked at his security chief. Preserve everything. Attorneys first, then law enforcement. Corbin stared at him. Perhaps that frightened him most. Matthias wasn't giving him a quick ending. He was giving him evidence, charges, testimony, and years in which the Savelli name would no longer protect him. As Corbin was taken away, Odette swayed slightly. Elara caught her arm. Matthias was beside them immediately. "I'm fine," Odette said. "You're shaking." "I can shake and still be fine." Elara smiled. "She's right." Matthias gave her an irritated look. Odette noticed. "Oh, wonderful." "What?" His mother looked between them. "I survive one poisoning and somehow wake up in a romance." Elara nearly choked. Matthias, astonishingly, looked uncomfortable. Odette smiled. A real smile this time. Then she turned toward the dining room. "My dinner is getting cold." Matthias stared at her. "You want to go back?" Odette looked at the table waiting beyond the corridor. Months earlier, food had become proof that nowhere was safe. Tonight, the man who had created that fear was gone. But Elara understood something important. Healing would not happen because Corbin had been caught. Tomorrow could still be difficult. Odette could still hesitate. She would still need doctors, time, and the freedom to have bad days without calling them failure. But tonight, she was making a choice. "Yes," Odette said. "I want to finish eating." Elara walked beside her. Matthias followed. And for the first time, nobody at the table watched to see how much Odette ate. They simply had dinner. 3 months later, Odette still had bad days. Elara considered that important. Recovery had not transformed into a perfect upward line simply because Corbin Vale was awaiting trial. Odette still worked with her doctors. Some mornings, an unfamiliar smell could make her hesitate. Sometimes she wanted only tea and toast. But now hesitation did not automatically become terror. Most days, she ate normally. More importantly, she chose. Which was why Elara knew it was time to leave. Her original contract had been extended twice. The emergency was over. Odette no longer needed a private cook hovering around her recovery. At least, that was what Elara told herself while packing. "You're leaving." Matthias stood in the doorway. "That is generally what suitcases indicate. I can increase your salary." Elara looked at him. There he was. Matthias Savelli, multimillionaire industrialist, mafia boss, commander of men who moved the moment he spoke, trying to solve an emotional problem with payroll. "No, double it." She laughed. "Absolutely not." His expression tightened. "What would make you stay?" That stopped her. Elara slowly straightened. "That's dangerously close to begging. Don't get ambitious." She smiled. But Matthias didn't. He stepped into the room. For months, Elara had watched this man learn that protecting someone and controlling them were not the same thing. Now he stood before her without an order, without leverage, without an offer she couldn't refuse. "Stay because you want to," he said. Elara's smile faded. "And if I say no?" Matthias was quiet for a moment. Then he answered, "I'll still drive you home." Something inside her softened, not because he was willing to let her leave, because he finally understood that letting her leave was what made staying mean something. Elara stepped closer. His eyes dropped briefly to her curves, then returned to her face with an admiration he no longer bothered hiding. "You've become inconveniently teachable," she said. "You've become excessively pleased with yourself. Is that a yes to keeping me?" "I thought I was the one asking." She smiled. "Then ask properly." Matthias stared at her. A man who could move millions with a phone call suddenly looked as though 5 simple words were an unreasonable demand. "Will you stay with me?" Elara let him wait. Just long enough. Yes. That evening, she joined Odette at dinner, not as the cook standing beside the table. As a woman choosing to sit at it, Odette looked between Elara and Matthias and sighed. "Wonderful. I finally got my appetite back, and now I have to watch this." Elara laughed. To her surprise, Matthias did too. Months ago, everyone in that house had watched Odette's plate. Tonight, nobody counted her bites. Nobody questioned her choices. Nobody waited nervously for something terrible to happen. They simply ate. And Elara realized that was what she had been trying to give them from the beginning. Not the perfect meal, not a miracle, just a table where nobody had to be afraid,